Hello, and welcome to the Three Questions Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Now, if you or someone close to you are frequent visitors to the United States, you will not want to miss this week's episode. Why? Well, our topic is the three questions frequent visitors to the United States should ask before their next visit. Thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Three Questions Podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. In 2023, approximately 21.2 million trips were made by Canadian visitors to the United States. From tourism and visiting loved ones to attending business meetings and conferences, there are clear activities permitted under visitor visas. However, the line can sometimes be blurred, and if you're on the wrong side of that blurred line, you could also find yourself on the wrong side of the law. Today, we're joined by Heidi Son. Heidi is an immigration attorney and founding partner with Fairfax, Virginia-based Kodem Tang Law Group. And today, we're going to discuss the three questions frequent visitors to the United States should ask before their next visit. Heidi, great to see you. Thank you for making time for us today, and again, making yourself available for our podcast.
Thank you, Wayne, for having me.
I appreciate it. I got just to give everybody a kind of a cue as to how this all came together. Heidi and I met, I guess, over a year ago, and she invited me to attend a webinar where she was the guest speaker, and her presentation really kind of raised a few eyebrows, including mine. And suffice to say, that presentation, Heidi, inspired me to invite you to be on the podcast. So I'm finally glad that we were able to make our schedules work so that you could have you on with us today. The last few months, in addition to us creating our new studio here, we had that going on. Your last little while has been quite busy as well because you decided to start a new law firm. So before we get to our three questions and all of that, why don't you just take a couple minutes and tell us about your law firm and your practice?
Thank you. So I've been doing immigration for over, 13 plus years now, and I was a labor employment lawyer for 5 years at a big law firm. I'm pretty active in several different volunteer nonprofit organizations, and one of them is the Asia chapter of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And I was on the executive committee there, and I met my two partners there. And we really work well together. We have similar visions of what we're looking for, kind of service that we want to provide. And, looking around, there's not a lot of all women-owned, all minority-owned law firms. So we decided to start one on our own. And the three of us have very diverse backgrounds, but we
You all practice immigration law, is that right?
Yes, we all do business immigration, employment-based immigration. And most of our clients are corporations or individual investors, entrepreneurs, startups. We do occasionally get some artists and performers and musicians, as you can see from my background here.
Yes.
I painted.
Very artsy. Is that one of your creations?
Yes. So I was
Beautiful.
a major before I went to law school. So we really are proud of the law firm that we have created, and it's very busy. And we're excited to start our law firm with three very, committed women.
Well, I acknowledge the fact that your schedule is really challenging, and I was really appreciating again that you could squeeze us in here today. Okay, you know what? Before we get to our three questions, one more thing. You and I should discuss, how the recent election where, Donald J. Trump became the 47th president of the United States, how's that going to impact U.S., immigration law going forward? Now, most of the headlines, as I'm sure you're more than aware, have focused on deportations of individuals who entered the United States illegally and have committed violent crimes. For our discussion, though, I really want to focus on employment visas. Having, for yourself, you mentioned you've been practicing immigration law for 13 years, 5 years as a labor employment law. So you've been really on the front lines on both sides, immigration and on employment law. Now, as I understand it, President Trump has stated that he supports visas for highly skilled workers, and in particular, he expressed more favorable stance for the H-1B program, stating that it was a great program and acknowledging his use of H-1B visa holders at his properties. So I'm really interested, given how like this is like a now issue, like how do you see this unfolding going forward? Like what's your take on all of this?
Yes. So, obviously my clients are also concerned, even though they're not illegal immigrants, they have legal status here in the United States about how the new administration will affect their H-1B or their green card applications, etc., given what happened 8 years ago.
Mhm.
Now, I know that President Trump
Maybe you can
has.
give us a bit of a revision, a history lesson of what 8 years ago was like for you as an immigration attorney.
Yes. So while President Trump has stated positively about the H-1B program and highly skilled workers, et cetera, this time around, unlike last time, if we take lessons from what happened 8 years ago, um, because we could only project based on the past, right? The past
Right.
experience. 8 years ago, he was pretty tough, not just on illegal immigration, but also legal immigration as well, in particular with the H-1B program. So just to give you a background, the H-1B program, if you make the lottery and then you're selected and you submit the application, it is one of the highest approved petition. So there's a over like 95% approval rate for H-1B.
If
And
you win the lottery and you get an H1, you win the H1B lottery, it's almost a fait accompli that you'll be approved, what you're saying.
right. And then if what you submit is what the USCIS, the government agency, considers for some reason insufficient, the issue was called the request for further evidence. We call it the
Yes.
RFE.
I'm familiar with
Um,
that, by the way.
never like getting those because it takes more time, more money, and the client's not happy. The lawyers lose money on it, and so
Check,
nobody's happy.
check, and check. I can agree
Right.
again with all the above.
Right. So nobody likes getting RFEs. But the H-1B program actually has a very low RFE rate. It has a very high approval rate and very low RFE rate. So historically, it's been maybe 5% RFE rate. Um, and during the prior Trump administration, in the first 6 months, the RFE rate went from 5% to 60%, six
Go
zero.
on.
Yeah, so obviously we're very, very busy. Usually our summers are very quiet, but our summers were filled with responding to all these RFEs. And unfortunately, the denial rate also went up to about 30% or so.
Can they be
So
appealed? Just out of curiosity, are those when there's a denial, is there a way of continuing a path forward, or is it
yes, so you can appeal. The only thing is the appeal process takes a really long time, usually a year or more. So generally speaking, we just say to refile. It's much faster. It's expensive again because you have to pay all the fees over.
sure?
Um, so I I mean that's one point. And then the other thing is because of the hiring freeze and everything else, we're expecting longer delays and backlogs in the US embassies when you're trying to get a visa stamp in your passport. So it's not just how the review process might become more stringent, but
Hmm.
also just a lack of enough personnel support.
The time frame for getting anything finished is going to be a lot longer because that was a real big issue back. I remember back going through the first time around was the frustration and speaking to other attorneys that I
Mhm.
know across the U.S. here about and people, clients as well. I remember this one H1B case, H1B visa case of a case of clients I was working on. I mean, it went on. I think it might have taken 10 years by the time
Oh,
they got their green cards.
yeah, yeah. The green card process is taking a really long
Yeah,
time right now.
but I'm just saying, what I'm trying to get at is that the everybody was talking about how everything just took longer.
Yeah. And we haven't fully recovered from the backlogs that was created 8 years ago. So the fact that we have the administration back and it's gonna it's just gonna be like a domino effect, right? And so
So you don't, okay, as you said, you can only go based on experience, right? My sense, and again, I'm not an insider here, so I'm not like I know something that you don't per se. But my perspective or my perception is that, uh, and again, this could be because of the influence of Elon Musk,
Mhm.
and a few other folks that he's now surrounded himself with, is that, it's important for the United States to import talent,
Mhm.
skilled workers. So the impression the impression I have, and again, based on my what I've read and what I've heard, is that they're going to be more favorable, and also for student visas for foreign students who graduate from a U.S. university. Apparently, he was in favor of somehow giving them a pathway to permanent residency as well. Again, that's what I've heard. I don't know if you're hearing differently, and I guess time will tell. Is that your take, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so of course I've heard the news clips. I've seen the news clips of, President Trump making these promises during his campaign. Um, I will believe it when I see it. I'm skeptical.
Well, all this does is give us a reason to reconvene,
Right.
right? We
Yes.
now have a reason to do a follow-up podcast, Heidi.
Yep.
All righty. So why don't we get right to our three questions? Okay. We're going to be discussing the three questions frequent visitors to us should ask before their next visit. And I'm going to tell you right now, uh, pay close attention. I think you're going to be in for some eye openers here. So these questions are from the perspective of the visitors. So if you're visiting the U.S. or planning to visit the U.S. in the next little while, pay close attention. Okay, so question number one. What activities are permitted as visitors to the U.S.? I know you put together a list of activities, so I'm interested to see what your list includes.
Yeah, so of course, tourism, if you're coming to visit families and friends, going to Disneyland, Las Vegas, coming for a wedding, all of those personal type
Orlando,
of,
yeah, the whole deal, right?
yeah,
Exactly.
vacation type of
Football
visits.
games in Buffalo. I'm from
Yeah,
Toronto originally, so crossing the board to go to see the Bills get, well, hopefully not lose again.
yeah. We were very disappointed when Commanders lost too. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm torn. I'm a big Mahomes fan, but that's another
um,
story.
yeah, so we're not looking forward to the Super Bowl, but there you go. So, um,
Story about the Washington Commanders. Yeah, they didn't quite make it.
yeah. So those are kind of the tourism activities. And then the other like business activities that's allowed is business meetings, negotiating contracts, attending conferences, seminars, business meetings as in like uh, meetings with potential clients, potential investors, that kind of business meeting where you're not involved in any gainful employment, meaning what you would normally do in your job, at your office, let's say in England or Canada or wherever you are, as long as you're not engaged in what's called gainful employment activities, um, there are certain business activities that you can engage in, such as business meetings.
Okay, now that leaves me. I have a question back on that one.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm at a conference. Maybe I'm in New York, Chicago, uh, and I had before I left scheduled a Zoom meeting. I'm in Toronto, just as a perfect example. I have a Zoom call with a client of mine or a
Mhm.
prospective client. Should I reschedule that till until after I get back to Toronto, or is it okay to take that type of a call?
So what I tell my clients is that, well, usually when they come to me, they've already done something they're not supposed to do. So,
Yeah, of course.
right?
Sounds
So,
familiar.
yeah, but so basically, what I call it is the butt test, right? So if you are physically in the United States, it doesn't matter if you're working for a foreign company in China, Korea, wherever, and that you're getting paid, meaning the money is going from that Chinese company to your Chinese bank account, right? And you are just visiting in the United States and you're checking emails, like, getting on Zoom meetings, whatever. Um, if that's part of what you would normally do in your course of employment, you're not supposed to be doing that while you're physically in the United States. That said, especially with the post-COVID world, a lot of people are virtual now and they
Mhm.
engage in a lot of these virtual activities. Um, there is sort of like an analysis you can do, like what is your primary purpose in coming to the United States, right? If your primary purpose is coming to the United States to attend the conference and you're spending the vast majority of your time attending that conference, and that one Zoom meeting with a prospective client in Canada is just incidental to your visit to the United States to attend a conference, then it should be fine. Now, if the conference is 1 week long and you decide, you know what, I actually, it's too cold to go back to Toronto and I want to stay in Florida for another 2 weeks. And I'm gonna, for the next 2 weeks, work in Florida out of my little Airbnb, looking out into the ocean or whatever. And you are actually working. Well, those 2 weeks now you are violating your B1 visitor status.
Well, that segues quite nicely into our second question. So I jumped ahead of myself, but I couldn't resist. So, because question number two, we can have a discussion around this. Question number two is if I'm attending a team, here it is. We'll start from the beginning. If I'm attending a team meeting or team building retreat in the US with my colleagues, am I able to work? And again, respond to calls, emails, client follow up.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like leading into what you just said.
Right. So again, if the retreat, let's say you have a retreat in Santa Barbara at this lovely cliff, hotel or whatever, and
Right.
it's for 5 days.
We used to go to the
And
Hotel Del Coronado, and when in Canada, I used to go to the Hotel Del Coronado down in San Diego. It's just a gorgeous place. By the way, if you've never visited, a little free advertising for the Hotel Del is spectacular. But that's an example.
Right. So, and let's say the team building is with colleagues in the United States as well as, from all over the world. Let's say you work for a global company that has an office in the US as well as, other places, right? Including your Canadian office, let's say. Well, the team building part is fine. You are attending this retreat, you're maybe doing hypos and pretending to work on a project together. All of that is fine. And during those 5 days, if you happen to check emails in the morning and in the evening and you respond to your clients or maybe even get on a call here and there, again, that is probably incidental to your primary purpose of coming to a retreat. So that probably is fine. Now, most of my clients, what they ask me is, well, I flew this guy from India, all the way from India, for a 5 day retreat. You mean he can't come into my San Francisco office, New York office, wherever, for another month? Because he has a visa for 6 months. Can't he come into my office for 1 month and actually really work with the US employees and his colleagues and see how the New York office works and how we, deal with clients, etc.? I was like, no, you can't. Not on a B1 visitor visa. You can on if you get a work visa, right? And it becomes even more complicated if there is an office in the US. If the company has actual presence in the US and there's a US company, it becomes even more gray, right? More iffy, you more risky, I guess I should say.
Interesting. So here's a question as a follow-up. I don't think I'm stepping on the toes of my own questions here. How long? So I think most of us would acknowledge, and again, I didn't know what everybody did, but I think most people, and this I'm using my own personal experience here, okay, just as the reference point. So again, we talk to a lot of Canadians, our practices cross border with Canada, and what happens often is, but people will just say they're visiting the country to go to a conference or whatever, like you just said. How long can someone stay in the US as a quote unquote visitor without getting into the crosshairs of border services? What's the general rule of thumb? And I know there's depending on where you're from, will may different time. But so for Canadians, how long would it be, for example, if you're coming from Canada? Or you can use examples of other places as well if you'd like.
Right. So technically, there's a maximum period, right?
Yes.
So legally, there's a maximum period. So for most country nationals throughout the world, you need a what's called a B visa stamp in your passport. You have to actually
Right.
go to a consulate, do an interview, explain why you're going to the United States, and get a visa stamp. So like Indian nationals, Chinese nationals, most of the countries around this world would have to get a B visa stamp. And the visa stamp, also the period of the visa stamp depends on your nationality. But if you're coming into the United States with a visa stamp, it's usually 6 months is the maximum period you can stay in the United States. Now, there's something called the visa waiver program, which is certain countries that have low fraud, right? Low fraud meaning people don't actually come on a B1 and then overstay or do something they're not supposed to, that kind of. So like England, a lot of European countries, like Japan, Korea, they're under the visa waiver program.
And I would know Canada would be as well, no?
Right. Canada is even super exception to that rule.
Oh,
So
super right
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Yay,
So
Canada.
so you so those country nationals don't have to apply for a visa stamp at the consulate. They can just apply online, what's called ESTA, and they can come. And then as long as there's no criminal record or something like that, they get it approved, and then they could come to the United States. And their visit can be a maximum of 3 months. Now for Canadians, you don't need a visa stamp. You can come to the border
You
and you
just
can say,
showed it up at the airport in Toronto, for example. And
yeah,
by the way, in Toronto, you go through U.S. Customs. I don't know if you knew this, Heidi,
yeah,
but
Toronto has
in
its
Toronto, you
own.
go, you do the customs in Toronto at the airport. So that
Yeah.
when you get to the U.S., you don't have to go through customs at all.
Right. Um, so um, so Canadians have a very like a special exception to the rule, right? That nobody else enjoys. Hopefully the treaty between the
Yeah,
agreement
I was just thinking the same.
and the
We'll
US
see
will
how things
stay.
go with the
Yes.
tariff. Well,
Yeah.
that could be a
Yeah.
situation.
So you are allowed to stay maximum period of 6 months, right? Generally speaking. And then
Right.
there's months if you're on a visa waiver program. However, if so I've had clients where they're Canadian, dual citizen usually. They come for 6 months and then they leave to go back to Canada for like a week. And then they come back. They stay another 6 months. They leave for another week or two, come back, and then stay
Well,
another
they're
six.
dual citizens. They're going to be any crosshairs of the IRS anyway. That's one
No, no,
thing.
no, not dual citizen with the US. I'm saying
Oh,
Canadian and some other like Pakistan
okay. Oh,
or
sorry.
something like
I
that.
thought you
Yeah.
meant dual citizens
Yeah.
with the United
No,
States.
no.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So
Carry on.
yeah, so when they're doing that, eventually,
They're
well,
going to get in
Canadian
trouble.
border is kind of like they don't scrutinize that much. But when they later want to apply, let's say for a green card or a work visa or whatever it is, right? Investment visa, whatever. That periods of stay, these elongated periods in the United States with very short leave from the United States is going to be scrutinized. And you will have a hard time explaining what you were doing here for all that period of time. What were your family doing? What were your children doing during all
How are
that
you
long?
financially supporting yourself while you were
Right.
here?
So,
I just thought of that one
yes,
myself. Yeah. What's,
yeah,
how
it
many?
gets hairy and you can't answer, then you're gonna be like, you're gonna not be able to come back into the United States.
Yeah. Well,
So,
that
like the children are not supposed to go to school if you're here as a visitor, for example, right? So, all of these things, you know,
I'm more than aware. It's amazing. I could hijack the conversation just to recount back to our own experience of coming into the country. It was, we were very careful not to break any of the rules. And one of them was, getting our children into school. And so because my visa was going to take longer, my wife actually took as I like to say, she took a bullet for the family and enrolled in some courses at Santa Monica College so we can get an F1 visa,
mhm,
which allowed us to immediately come into the country and allowed our children to legally get enrolled in high school. And
mhm.
so my wife spent a year taking courses at Santa Monica College. She had a 3.85 GPA, so it was
Wow.
I was suitably impressed while I was working away at my E2 visa. So, all right. So, very good, Heidi. Let's go on to question number one. Again, Heidi Son is our guest today. She's a Fairfax, Virginia-based immigration attorney. And I'm really happy you can make time for us today again. So, question number three, and again, the question we're asking today are the three questions uh, frequent visitors should ask before coming to the U.S. And question number three is, what are the potential risks if I conduct work-related activities while visiting the US? So, the perfect example that you gave was uh, maybe coming into the US, going to a conference, and deciding, you know what, let's stay a couple more weeks.
Mhm.
And during those couple more weeks, yes, some sightseeing is occurring, but more often than not, there's a lot of work occurring. Or even a better example, someone who is, decided to get a second place down here in the U.S. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but the months of say December through to March aren't always the most pleasant in north of the border. So maybe you come down and spend it down south of the border and just set up shop and work virtually from there. So in
Mhm.
those examples, what are the risks? What can happen? Uh, and again, you can walk it through the process of how this could unfold from just your regular going back and forth, crossing the border. Yes, I'm going. Like, how could this go off the rails?
Right. So we often have like top executives, for example, from different countries where they're trying to set up their first subsidiary in the US. And they often come to the US pretty frequently for, let's say, a couple of weeks at a time. But for the last 3 months or something, they've been coming like repeatedly, right? So after like the third or fourth visit, they get stopped usually, and the CBP officer at the airport will start asking you a lot of questions. Hey, you've been here. This is your fourth time now in the last 3 months. Like, you keep coming back. What's going on? Like, why are you here so often? Now, for the executive, he has a very good excuse. He's saying, hey, I work at this big company in Korea. I'm trying to set up their first subsidiary here. I'm not working. We're trying to figure out where the office is going to be, looking at different locations. I'm negotiating the lease contracts, etc. Once we set it up and I need a work visa, I will apply for one. But for now, there's no work going on. I'm just doing business meetings, right? He
Yeah.
should be let in. He should be fine. Now, on the other hand, if somebody is a very wealthy individual and they own a home, like you said, in Florida, and every every year, let's say they end up coming for 6 months during the cold months, right? Like you said. And you did this first time, second time, third time, probably okay. Now, the CBP, a smart CBP officer, if they see a pattern, right, of this like this recurring visits that happen for a long period of time, every month, every year, consistently, they might take you into the secondary. So the secondary is where they pull you out of the line and put you into a special office, right? And they start grilling you, like on TV where the police officers start
Right, right.
interrogating you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not pleasant at all. And they can take your phone, ask you to open it. They can check your texts, your emails, your social media. They
Would they
can
take
ask,
your laptop if you have a
they can
laptop
take your
with you?
laptop. They can open your suitcase to see what's in there. Um, if you said, hey, I'm just coming for a wedding for a short visit, but then they see all this clothes in there with like your winter jackets or whatever when it's only September, things like that, they're gonna be like, hey, I thought you said you're gonna be here for only a couple of weeks for a wedding. What the hell? Why do you have a parka, like down parka with all, fur everywhere or whatever it is? So, if you're in the secondary and you've done something that you know you shouldn't have done, or maybe you don't even know, I would say the best advice is be very humble, be very contrite, be apologetic, be respectful, and to cooperate and answer the questions as honestly as possible. Once you start lying, everything goes south from there. And once you start being defensive and argumentative and rude, right? That's the worst thing
It
you could
gets into
do.
a shouting match or into
Right.
yeah, then you're
Then you're
going
out
off
of
the
here.
rails.
Like once this officer starts to get angry, you're not coming into the United States. You're being turned back.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to I was thinking about this because again, I've been getting used to obviously going back and forth and going from, that F1 visa, and I won't get into that, but that was an experience. But then I've been going back and forth obviously for quite a while now, and yeah, that's I never want to. get too mouthy with a border agent. But one thing I've often wondered, and now that you're here, I'm going to pick your brain on this, is how much authority does a border agent actually have? And just say you get into that, maybe
Mhm.
it goes off the rails inadvertently. Like if they make a decision, is this something that can be appealed? It can be overturned, or is it like too bad, so sad? What I say goes, and that's it. How does that work?
It's too bad, too sad. What I say goes. So
Really? That
they
cut and
have,
dried.
well, they have full discretion, right? They're the protectors of the border. So you're a foreign national, right? You have no rights in the United States. You have no right to be in the United States. And so you are asking for a favor to that officer. Please let me in. I'm a good person. I'm coming in for lawful activities that are allowed under the visa category that I'm coming in. And that's what you have to convince them. The assumption is you're coming in for something you're not supposed to. So
Hmm. So you're
that's
in this case, you're in a way you're kind of presumed guilty before you're innocent. So you had to prove that when you go to the border, you have to prove that you're not coming in for something nefarious.
right.
So the
Especially if,
border agent's perspective is, in theory, that you are coming in for reasons that you shouldn't, and you have to convince them otherwise.
right. So it's called immigrant intent. So you know, so you're a green card holder, of course, no problem. You come in, right? You're just like a US citizen, basically. Although 8 years ago, it wasn't treated that way. So hopefully it'll stay the same. But so
Be optimistic, Heidi.
yes, I will try. So, if you're basically every foreign visitor is assumed to have immigrant intent. Immigrant intent meaning that you are trying to live permanently in the United States as a green card
Got
holder.
it. Okay.
So you have to convince the officer
That
that
you want
no,
that you're actually going to leave.
right, that you're going to leave when you're supposed to, and then you're not going to be doing anything you're not supposed to be doing while you're in the United States. That doesn't mean just crimes or doing something stupid. It also means you are going to limit yourself to the activities you're allowed under that visa. Remember, it's supposed to be a privilege for you to be coming into the United States as a foreign national, right? And so you're not entitled to any rights. You're not entitled to be in the United States. So I think sometimes I have a hard time explaining this to clients who are very wealthy individuals or who are top executives of, huge conglomerates in Asia.
Don't
They
they know
have
who
a
I am?
right,
Right?
exactly.
Don't they know
And
who I am?
right. I call it the entitlement attitude. And I had one client who said, he's supposed to be going to this visa interview at the consulate, and he goes, "Well, I'm gonna have to bring my chauffeur, and work. Can they give me a VIP parking space?" And so I said,
I'm,
"No, you can't park, period. You cannot bring your
that's the
chauffeur.
best.
You
Could
have
I
to
get
ride."
VIP parking at the US?
Yeah, so that he could just go straight
Wow.
into.
Oh,
So I
sure.
was,
I bet
yes,
you
I
they
was
were
like,
really surprised when they went through. What a surprise that was. That was going into the US consulate. I'm telling you, belts, shoes off. They were checking my dossier, all my immigration for Ryzen. Like they were like,
so
they were like, it's not, yeah, it's
yeah. I was like, you can take a
LA
taxi
parking.
and like, or you can bring your chauffeur, but he will have to drop you off and then you have to walk
Mm.
the last,
Your chauffeur may be subject to a body cavity search too, by the way. So
So he was like, what do you mean you can't get me a VIP parking spot?
that's
Uh,
that's classic. I'm so I just trying to envision that. All
yeah,
right. I'm sorry I'm getting off the rails here. That's great, Heidi. Seriously. Oh
yeah,
well. What'd you call it again? The
attitude.
entitlement attitude. Yeah, I'll be good. Okay, look, I know you've given us a lot of time, but before we wrap up, I have one more. I want to get back to this one because I talked about it earlier. I'll talk about my favorite visa, the E2 visa.
Mhm,
It's the one that helped me get into and working here with One Capital, and I'm forever grateful. Uh, Now, this is again, I think you would acknowledge this. We've seen here with this new administration sort of this trend towards a merit-based system, right?
mhm.
So, because of this, do you think this is going to lead to a more positive view towards the E2, the, the E2 investor who's coming to the US saying, I want to start up a new business. Do you think it will be, and the program will be changed, made easier? What is your view on that program in particular?
Yeah, so just to clarify, the E2 investor visa is a temporary visa. It's not the same thing as an EB5
That's for sure.
permanent residency visa. So EB5, there's a requirement for you to invest at least $1.05 million, right, for the most part.
It was
And
500,000 back in 2012, by the way.
yeah, not anymore.
Yeah.
And so, and there's a long waiting period. So the E2 investor short temporary visa is actually a very good alternative for a lot of foreign nationals. You have to be a foreign national of a certain country nationality. So not everybody qualifies. For example, Indian, Chinese, Vietnamese, they're not a treaty country with the United States. So there is no E2 option for them. Um, so for like Canadians, for example, E2 is an option. Most European countries is an option, and like Korea, Japan, it's an option for them. So it does allow for some flexibility because you don't have to invest $1 million. You can invest like 100,000 or so, and you can get your E2 visa.
What's the
Uh,
limit? What's the minimum number of employees that you have to, a number of American employees you have to be able to employ in order to qualify for the E2 program?
Right. So there is no regulatory minimum like the EB5 program. The EB5 program says you have to hire at least 10 US
Right,
workers,
right.
whereas E2, there is no regulatory minimum. What it says is that the E2 enterprise has to generate enough revenue profit so that it doesn't just feed the investor and his family. So it leaves it kind of vague. So if it makes it seem like you can just hire one US worker in the first, 5 years or whatever the period, right? So it has to be reasonable and make sense in your whatever your business is.
As I recall, I
So
think the way it worked that they said, this is my recollection, tell me if this is changed, is that if you can demonstrate that you can employ more workers, it makes the visa more easy to be approved, is the way I understood it. Is that accurate or not?
so basically it depends on the type of business.
Right,
So say you're starting, I don't know, food truck business, right? Well, likely the likelihood is you can't hire 10 workers, right? You can't fit
right,
them in the truck,
right.
right? So you could
Well,
probably hire,
you could have 9 trucks though, Heidi. I mean, there's
right?
always
But I'm
that.
saying if you started with one,
Got it.
and yeah, so and then if you're approved, I'm sure like the embassy will be okay if you hired one person or two people
Got it.
versus let's say you're starting a high-end sushi restaurant in Manhattan and you hired only one US worker. Well, then it
That's
becomes
going to be a
like,
bit interesting.
yeah, problematic, right? Like they're gonna be like, well, where did you get the other 20? Oh, it had my aunt, my uncle, my, cousin, my whatever. Then it becomes a little bit more dicey.
All right. Well, listen, you know what? You're awesome guests. And I said, as the world unfolds here, immigration wise, we'll be giving you a call back and we'll see where we stand in terms of how the backlog and the visas and all of that with H-1Bs. Well, I look forward to an update. So now the good news is for those watching with on the website here, on the Three Questions website, uh, they can see your contact information. All of it's all there. But for those who have been listening on Apple or Spotify, how could you? I'm sure there's going to be questions for sure now. I mean, we've probably rattled more than a few pots and pans here, Heidi. Uh, what is the best way for someone who wants to contact you, to get a hold of you? What's the best way? Phone,
Yeah,
email? How?
yeah, email is the best way. So Heidi's son at ksdlawgroup.com. That will be the best way to reach me.
It's
I'm on
Heidi
email.
dot song, just to be
Okay.
clear.
The
Heidi
dot, the
dot
period,
song.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
Or can they connect you through the website?
Yes, they can also connect me to the website, but that goes to our like kind of group email.
Right, right.
So
Oh, they
it,
email you directly. So it's Heidi dot song at kstlawgroup.com.
yeah.
Perfect. Well, Heidi, again, thank you so much. It was awesome having you joining me today. Heidi Son is an immigration attorney and the founding partner of Fairfax, Virginia-based Kodem Son Tang Law Group. Heidi, thank you very much. I look forward to bringing you the Three Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video, subscribing to our YouTube channel and podcast channels. And to receive notification of when our latest episodes have been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we will see you soon.